Imagine a man whose life seems perfect in the eyes of anyone. This man is Job. He lives in the East, a distant and prosperous land, and his life is the epitome of righteousness. The Bible describes him as a blameless, upright man who feared God and shunned evil. Not only was he morally upright, but also the way he conducted his life was always in harmony with the principles of goodness and justice. Job was not just a man of faith, he was a living example of prosperity and success. With 7 sons and 3 daughters, he had a large and united family. His children were known for hosting feasts where everyone would gather to celebrate. They shared life in harmony, something that Job deeply cherished. Moreover, Job was an extremely wealthy man. His livestock was countless. Camels, oxen, sheep, donkeys, all thrived under his care. He had many servants, and his name was respected by all. His social status was so elevated that the Bible states he was the greatest man among all the people of the East. But what truly defined Job was not his wealth, influence, or status. What was most remarkable was his unwavering devotion to God. He didn't just live a holy life, he constantly interceded for his children, offering sacrifices to God, fearing that during their celebrations, one of them might, even unintentionally, have committed a sin. This attitude shows the depth of his faith, not only in his personal life, but also in his role as a father and spiritual protector of his family. Job's story begins as a true example of how a life of faith and devotion to God can be filled with blessings. But as we will see, this tranquility would soon be challenged, and Job's faith would be tested in unimaginable ways. The man who had everything would be pushed to the extreme of his endurance, and his journey would become one of the most iconic narratives of perseverance and faith in the entire Bible. From this point on, we are invited to witness what happens when the perfect life of a righteous man is abruptly interrupted. Now, imagine a heavenly scene, something beyond our comprehension. In a spiritual realm, invisible to human eyes, a cosmic meeting takes place. Angels, the sons of God, present themselves before the Creator, and among them comes a dark and cunning figure, Satan. He is not an intruder, but a being permitted to stand before God. However, unlike the other angels, he has a specific mission to test and challenge the faith of humans. God, knowing the heart of every being, turns his attention to Job. Amid the celestial silence, he asks Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him, blameless, upright, fearing God, and shunning evil." Satan, with his usual cunning, replies with a dangerous insinuation. "Of course he is faithful, but only because you bless him with everything he has. Who wouldn't be devoted, living such a perfect life? But I tell you this, take everything away from him, and let's see if he still worships you. I bet he will curse your name." Here, we see the beginning of a spiritual battle, a test of faith that transcends human understanding. God trusts Job. He knows that Job's devotion goes beyond his wealth or prosperity. So, God allows Satan to test him, but with a clear condition. Do what you want with everything he possesses, but do not lay a hand on him directly. This scene marks the starting point of a grand challenge. Satan believes that by taking away Job's material blessings, his faith will crumble. He is convinced that Job's faithfulness is shallow, supported only by the comfort and abundance he enjoys. Satan's plan begins to take shape. He will destroy everything Job owns, believing that this will expose the weakness of his faith. As spectators of this scene, we wonder, will Job remain faithful in the face of such adversity? How far can the faith of a man who has so far lived a life of blessings go? The stage is set, and Job's test of faith is about to begin. The tension in the heavenly air is palpable. Satan, full of confidence and malice, prepares to challenge Job's faith. God, knowing the heart of his servant, grants Satan permission to proceed, but with one clear limit. You may touch everything he owns, but do not lay a hand on his life. This marks the beginning of a cruel test, a trial that will stretch every fiber of Job's faith. Now we turn to earth, where Job lives his daily life, unaware of what is about to unfold. His wealth, family, and health, everything he has, is about to be placed at Satan's mercy. God's confidence in Job is unwavering. He knows that Job's faith does not rely on material possessions, prosperity, or even family stability. However, Satan believes that by stripping away these blessings, Job will falter. What follows is a series of devastating events, as if a dark cloud is about to descend upon Job's perfect life. Satan, now free to act, begins his relentless mission. Everything Job has built, everything he loves, is about to be destroyed, yet Satan is forbidden from touching Job's life directly. Meanwhile, in the unseen realm, a spiritual battle of immense proportions is underway. This is not just a test for Job, it is a trial for all of us, a reminder that even the most faithful can be tested in ways beyond our understanding. The stage is set, and every detail of this divine permission will be crucial to the unfolding of this story. What will happen when a righteous man, who has lived his entire life in devotion, faces the complete collapse of his world? What is about to happen is more than just a series of tragedies. It is a true descent into the valley of the shadow of death, where faith will be Job's only shield. He is about to face the storm of his life, and we, as spectators, will bear witness to this incredible journey of suffering, endurance, and faith. Will Job emerge from this test unscathed? Will his trust in God withstand the destructive forces about to be unleashed upon him? And then, what seemed to be just an ordinary day in Job's life turns into an unimaginable nightmare. Satan begins his mission of destruction, and everything starts to collapse quickly and brutally. Job is at home, perhaps at peace, unaware of what is about to happen. Suddenly, a messenger comes running, breathless and with a look of despair. "Job," he shouts, "the Sabaeans attacked! They stole all your oxen and donkeys, killed your servants, and I am the only one who escaped to tell you." Before Job can even process this devastating news, a second messenger arrives, just as distressed as the first. "Job, fire fell from the sky, consumed your sheep, and burned your shepherds to death. Nothing is left, and I am the only one who escaped to tell you." The impact of these reports is overwhelming. Job, who just moments ago had a life filled with wealth and prosperity, now sees his possessions and servants being destroyed in the blink of an eye. But the storm is not over yet. Before he can stand up or even react, a third messenger bursts into the room. "Job, the Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties, invaded your lands, stole your camels, and killed your shepherds. I alone escaped to tell you." 3 disasters in a row, each more devastating than the last. Job, who has always been a pillar of calm and righteousness, is now being pushed to the very limits of his emotional endurance. His herds, his wealth, everything that symbolized his prosperity and status is being destroyed in a cruel blow. However, the worst is yet to come. The 4th and final messenger arrives with news that no one could have imagined. He approaches with tearful eyes, his voice trembling. "Job, a great wind came from the desert. It struck the house where your sons and daughters were gathered. The walls collapsed, and they are dead, all of them. I'm the only one who escaped to tell you." At this moment, Job's heart, already torn apart by the previous tragedies, is irreparably shattered. It is no longer about material losses or livestock. Job has just lost what he loved most, his children. Job's world, once a reflection of divine blessings, has now become a scene of ruins and mourning. What will Job do now? How can anyone endure such immense pain and not lose their faith? Job's test has reached its peak, and the observer is left on the edge of the abyss, waiting to see if he will fall or remain standing. Imagine the silence after the storm. Job, now standing amidst the ruins of his life, feels the overwhelming weight of an incomparable tragedy. He has just lost everything: his wealth, his servants, and most painfully, his beloved children. The pain must be unbearable, an emptiness that seems impossible to fill. Anyone faced with such devastation might succumb to despair. But not Job. In an act that defies all human expectations, Job does not despair. He does not scream, curse, or rebel. Instead, he tears his clothes in a sign of mourning, a physical expression of the pain consuming his soul. He shaves his head, a gesture of deep humiliation, and kneels to the ground, not to complain, but to worship. Yes, to worship. Amid all this desolation, Job utters one of the most famous and impactful phrases in the Bible. "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." With these words, Job acknowledges a profound truth. Everything he had, from his wealth to his very children, was never truly his. Everything came from God's hands. And if God decided to take it away, Job accepts with faith and humility that this is part of a larger plan beyond his understanding. This is the moment when Job's faith shines the brightest. He does not blame God. He does not seek immediate explanations or try to rationalize why so much suffering has come upon him. He simply surrenders to the reality that God is sovereign, and even in the midst of pain, God remains worthy of praise. Job's response is not only an extraordinary act of faith, but also a lesson for all of us. It teaches us that in the depths of suffering, true faith is not measured by the absence of pain, but by the ability to trust God even when everything around us falls apart. Job is broken, devastated, and yet he chooses worship over rebellion. At this point, as spectators, we are led to deep reflection. What sustains us in our own moments of loss? If Job, who lost everything, still found the strength to praise God, what does this tell us about the power of faith in the face of the most difficult trials? Job's response is an extraordinary turning point. While many would expect him to succumb to despair, he shows us that even in the darkest hours, there is room for faith, for hope, and for the acceptance of God's will. After Job's remarkable act of faith, the story returns to the heavenly realm. Once again, the angels, the sons of God, gather before the Creator, and once more, Satan is among them. He, who witnessed all the tragedies he unleashed upon Job, seems frustrated. His initial plan to make Job curse God has failed. But Satan is not giving up. God, observing Job's unwavering faith, asks Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He remains blameless, upright, and God-fearing, even though you incited me to harm him without cause." Satan, always cunning, responds defiantly. Of course, he still holds on to his faith, but that's because he hasn't suffered personally. He lost his possessions. He lost his children, but if you strike his flesh, if he feels pain in his own body, then he will surely curse you to your face. Satan's insinuation is clear. He believes Job's faith has only remained intact because he has not yet experienced personal, physical pain or the loss of his own well-being. Satan is convinced that by inflicting suffering on Job's body, his faith will finally break. Once again, God allows Satan to test Job, but with one condition: do what you want with him, but spare his life. Satan now has permission to attack Job's health directly, believing that if Job suffers physically, his faith will be shattered at last. And so, the plot thickens. The stage is set for a new test, perhaps the most cruel of all. Job, who has already endured the loss of everything he loved, is about to face a kind of suffering he never imagined. Physical pain will be the next obstacle in his journey of faith. As spectators, we are led to wonder, how much pain can one endure without losing faith? What happens when suffering is no longer external, but becomes a battle within one's own body? Is Satan right in thinking that physical pain is the final blow that will break Job's faith? Or will Job once again surprise us with his unshakable devotion? The story now moves to a new level. Job, already emotionally devastated, will be tested in an even more intense way. But what will he do in the face of this new adversity? Will the faith he has shown so far be enough to withstand the pain that is to come? And then, the storm that already seemed unbearable intensifies. Satan, now with permission to afflict Job's body, wastes no time. He strikes Job with a terrible illness, a disease that consumes his skin and eats away at his flesh. Job is covered with painful sores from head to toe. He feels an unbearable itch to the point of picking up shards of pottery to scrape his wounded skin. The physical pain is constant, the discomfort immense, and Job's dignity, already shaken, now seems destroyed. The man who was once the most respected and powerful in all the East now sits on a pile of ashes, alone, his skin raw, his mind consumed by pain. He is unrecognizable, reduced to a shadow of what he once was, suffering public humiliation. The disease is more than just physical pain. It is a direct assault on his spirit, his confidence, and even his identity. And as if the physical pain were not enough, Job faces a new emotional blow. His wife, who has witnessed all the destruction alongside him, now buckles under the weight of suffering. Unable to bear anymore, she approaches Job and with bitterness says, "Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die." To her, Job's faith seems useless, a lost cause. She no longer sees any point in continuing to live under such affliction and believes the only way out is to renounce God and end the torture. But Job, even now, does not give in. In a moment of wisdom that transcends his pain, he responds to his wife, "You speak as a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" Even in his agony, Job maintains his faith without rebelling against God. He acknowledges that just as he received blessings, he must also endure suffering, for all things come from the hands of the Creator. Here, Job gives us yet another profound lesson. Even when his flesh is attacked, his faith remains unshaken. He does not allow physical pain to distance him from his belief in God's purpose. He doesn't understand why this is happening, but he chooses to trust even in the darkness, even when everything seems senseless. As spectators, we witness Job's incredible resilience. He, who has already lost everything, now loses even his health and comfort, and yet his faith remains unbreakable. The question that lingers is, how far can this strength go? And can anyone endure so much suffering without straying from the path of faith? Amid the darkness and unbearable physical pain, a new challenge arises for Job, and this one does not come from the outside, but from someone very close to him, his own wife. She, who has suffered alongside Job, witnessing the destruction of their family, their wealth, and now his health, is emotionally broken. The pain is so great that for her, there is no more reason to keep fighting. She approaches Job, already exhausted by the suffering that seems endless. With bitterness and despair, she utters her words, "Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die." These words are not just of frustration. They are a cry from someone who can no longer see the light at the end of the tunnel. For her, the only way out is to renounce faith, curse God, and put an end to the suffering. She is asking Job to give up everything, to abandon his integrity and surrender to death. For in her eyes, there is no more hope. This moment is profoundly emotional. In his pain, Job sees the woman who has always been by his side also succumb to the weight of the tragedies. His companion, whom he loves, is now encouraging him to do exactly what Satan had hoped for, to blaspheme against God. This is a moment of great vulnerability for Job, because the person who understands him most and shares his pain is now pushing him toward the abyss of disbelief. But even in his miserable condition, Job does not give in. He responds firmly, but without disrespect. "You are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" He is not condemning his wife, but trying to open her eyes to a deeper truth. Life is not made only of blessings. If we accept God's gifts, we must also accept the trials, no matter how difficult they may be. This is a crucial moment in Job's story. His faith is not shaken by physical pain, nor by his wife's bitter words. He remains steadfast in his conviction that God is sovereign, and even without understanding the reason for so much suffering, he cannot renounce the Creator. As spectators, we are led to reflect on Job's words. How many times in the face of adversity are we tempted to abandon our faith? How often can the people closest to us, in their own pain, lead us to question everything we believe in? Job's response is a powerful reminder that true faith does not depend on circumstances. It stands firm, even when everything around us seems to be falling apart. After everything Job had been through, the tragedies, the loss of his children, his failing health, and his wife's despair, another challenge now arises, this time in the form of his closest friends. Upon hearing about Job's overwhelming suffering, his three friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, travel from afar to comfort him. When they arrive, the sight of Job is so shocking that they can barely recognize him. The once prosperous and respected figure is now a man covered in sores, sitting in ashes, suffering both physically and emotionally. For 7 days and 7 nights, Job's friends remain by his side in silence, sharing in his pain without saying a word. This initial gesture is one of respect, as they acknowledge the depth of Job's suffering, for which words seem insufficient. However, the silence breaks, and what begins as an attempt to console soon turns into a series of dialogues filled with judgments. Job's friends, instead of offering support, begin to question his integrity. To them, the tragedies Job has suffered cannot be mere coincidences. According to their worldview, God is just and blesses the righteous while punishing sinners. Thus, they conclude that Job must have committed some hidden sin, something serious enough to justify such punishment. Eliphaz, the first to speak, suggests that Job should repent of his sins, even if he doesn't know what they are. Bildad, more direct, claims that Job's children must have sinned, and that's why they died. Zophar, the most relentless, accuses Job of arrogance, saying he deserves even more suffering than he has already received. Job's pain, already unbearable, is now worsened by the words of his friends. those who should have comforted him instead accuse him, making Job feel even more isolated. They fail to understand that Job's suffering is not the result of some hidden sin, but part of a much greater test of faith. Even so, Job maintains his integrity. He listens to the accusations, responds to his friends with dignity, but makes it clear that he does not understand why all of this is happening. His greatest struggle now is not only against physical pain or the loss of his family, but against the misunderstanding of those who should have supported him. This part of the story reminds us how, in moments of great suffering, those around us may, even unintentionally, add to our pain. Job's friends were convinced they understood God's ways, but their limited perspective prevented them from seeing the true purpose of Job's suffering. And as spectators, we are left with the question, do we sometimes judge based on wrong assumptions instead of offering true comfort? After all the suffering and accusations, the turning point in Job's story finally arrives. His situation, which seemed impossible to worsen, begins to change, but not through his own actions. Something greater is at work. God, who had allowed Job to be tested, now intervenes directly. Job's suffering did not go unnoticed, and his faith, which remained unshaken even in the face of the worst adversities, will finally be rewarded. God speaks to Job's friends, those who unjustly accused him. He rebukes them sternly, declaring that they did not speak correctly about God's character or about Job. "You have not spoken the truth about me, as my servant Job has," declares the Lord. And now these same friends who had judged and pointed fingers depend on Job to avoid God's punishment. God instructs the friends to offer sacrifices, but also asks for something surprising. Job, the man who had been unjustly accused by them, must pray for his friends so that they may be forgiven. Here, we see yet another example of Job's greatness. Even after everything he went through, the loss of his children, his health, his possessions, and finally the support of his friends, he holds no grudges. He prays for them with a pure and sincere heart. With this act of intercession, God not only forgives Job's friends, but also decides to restore everything Job had lost. God gives Job back twice what he owned before. His wealth is restored, his lands prosper again, and he receives new herds. But the greatest blessing comes in his family. Job has 7 sons and 3 daughters once more, the same number of children he had lost. His daughters, in particular, are described as the most beautiful in all the land, and Job treats them with great honor, giving them an inheritance, something unusual for the time. Job's life, which had seemed irreparably destroyed, is now abundant again. He lives a long and prosperous life, seeing his descendants through 4 generations. The suffering that had once seemed purposeless now reveals its lesson. Job's unwavering faith is rewarded, and his trust in God, even when there were no answers, is justified. As spectators of this journey, we are reminded that even when everything seems lost, the story of our life can take an unexpected turn. Job's suffering teaches us that faith, even when tested to its limits, can be the key to restoration beyond what we can imagine. And thus, the story of Job ends with a powerful reminder. Amid darkness and uncertainty, trusting in God is always the path to true reward.